Hey guys, another one take review, and today I want to talk about the Offspring's Americana. The Offspring have always been on my personal most overrated bands list, which is fairly short for the most part, to be honest, and Americana being their most famous, or at least arguably their most famous, tied with Smash, has always just been one of those inexplicably popular records to me. I truly just do not understand where all of the love and loyal fan base and the dedication that this band get, where it all comes from. A lot of my problems with them are directly shown on this album. For example, some of the worst songs here are actually some of the most iconic songs, which is hilariously ironic, but also very frustrating. I mean, the band already have a pretty spotty career, generally speaking, but songs like Pretty Fly for a White Guy, She's Got Issues, or Why Don't You Get a Job are ranging from bad and poorly written and mediocrely performed to straight up annoying. I mean, Why Don't You Get a Job is actually one of the worst songs of the 90s. Between its blatant ripoff of the Beatles' Obla Di Obla Da, which already isn't a great song on its own, but hey, it's better than whatever Why Don't You Get a Job is, and its attempts at humor, I think. I guess there's a joke there, but it really has no punchline, and I understand what they're going for of like the, oh hey, this person hates their girlfriend, this person hates their boyfriend, but it's not funny, and it really shows how incredibly juvenile that the Offspring were at this point in their career, but not even in a charming way in the way that bands like Green Day or Blink 182 could be. It's just annoying. Anyways, I'm getting off track. My point is the singles and the very well loved songs here are actually some of the worst on the album, and weirdly enough, the deep cuts are actually generally some of the better tracks here, and they manage to at least balance out what would otherwise be a imbalance of quality towards the negative side of things. Now, what I just mentioned regarding Why Don't You Get a Job about it just not being funny is something that goes farther beyond that song. I mean, Why Don't You Get a Job is the defining example of that throughout Americana, but Americana as an entire piece wants to be so hilarious and funny outside of a couple of songs and just completely fails in every way. Even songs like Pretty Fly for a White Guy, while they may seem at least slightly charming in their stupidity at first, really grow old quick, and that's on first listen, not even after multiple listens. It just kind of feels like a 14-year-old's first attempt at stand up, just put to record with some solid but largely unremarkable instrumentals to back them up. This is only worsened by the fact that you have songs here like The End of the Line and The Kids Aren't Alright, which is my personal favorite, that just are powerful. They can be very serious at times, and they just refuse to follow up with that tone, which is obviously the better side of the record and significantly less cringeworthy, significantly more gripping, and most of all, much more well performed. If Americana realized just how unfunny it was and just chose to stick to being a serious outing for the Offspring, we would have had a much better record on our hands, and actually, at that, maybe a great one. Because, I mean, the actual musicianship on Americana is unsurprisingly solid, as the Offspring have been consistently very good but not great musicians over the course of their career. Ron Welty's drumming is very energetic and snappy, and at times gives Americana a much needed edge musically. Bassist Greg Kay, although he's arguably the most unnotable member of the band and certainly no Mike Dirnt, is still a very talented performer who delivers some solid work on songs like No Breaks. Even Dexter Holland and the oddly nicknamed Noodles are two very strong guitarists that, although they're not doing any epic solos or any particularly memorable riffs, do their job and they do it well. The instrumentals on Americana, while they may not stand up to a lot of their peers and contemporaries musically, is still solid, and I mean, it just goes to show that the Offspring were capable of much more than just immature, unthought out, just underdeveloped jokes played over some strong ish instrumentals. The instrumentation here actually really just demonstrates how much potential was wasted on Americana. If there's less for me to complain about in terms of lyrical content here, I would actually be praising the performances even more, but frankly, the album just doesn't deserve it. Now, the actual issue I have in terms of performance here is Dexter Holland as a vocalist slash guitarist. Holland has a rough and at times fairly strained voice, which is maybe a bit odd or off putting at first, but it works sometimes. If you look at songs like Staring at the Sun, which is a major highlight for me throughout this album, maybe my favorite song on the record, you can see that he can work well with the more punkish, edgy moments. However, more often than not, Holland's vocals are just kind of weak and lacking in energy in comparison to the actual instrumentals of songs like Walla Walla. This causes almost every song on this record that had any sense of potential to be immediately squandered once Dexter Holland starts to make pathetic attempts at recapturing angsty teenage violence in his voice. While the Offspring certainly could have asked for a much worse vocalist, I mean, obviously there are much worse punk vocalists out there than Dexter Holland, even in pop punk, they definitely could have asked for a much better one as well, and one maybe a bit more fitting for their instrumentation. Overall, the Offspring are just a band that I can't personally bring myself to enjoy very much. For every great piece of sarcastic and snarky angst that they put out, they've got 5 songs following that just feel utterly pointless and really serve no purpose than to just be annoying, frankly. While I wouldn't quite say they were one of the worst rock bands of the 90s, obviously the 90s was a very questionable time for a lot of rock music. They certainly weren't one of the best, and they really weren't even a mid-level band of the 90s. They wouldn't even be in a C or even maybe D tier for me. They're like E tier band. And generally speaking, I just don't think that they deserve the critical or public accolades that they've gotten over the years. So that's why I'm giving this album 2.5 stars out of 5. Americana just doesn't do anything for me. There are too many flaws here for me to really enjoy it from front to back, or even cherry picking certain songs off of it. Really, if I'm being honest, just listen to The Kids Are Alright and Staring at the Sun. Those are the 2 songs here that stand out the most to me, and if you're kind of a stickler for wanting to learn more about an artist based entirely off of their singles and popular songs, just listen to The Kids Are Alright. You don't need to hear Why Don't You Get a Job, you don't need to hear Pretty Fly for a White Guy. I'm sure you've heard that one way too many times, unwillingly to want to hear that again voluntarily, so my point is, Americana, it's overrated, and frankly, unless you're exploring the history of pop punk, it's just not worth your time. So, with that being said, again, 2.5 stars out of 5, and that's the end of this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.